This is an analysis of two industries by me, Cody Walker. Logging is a very dangerous industry. Coming from someone who used to work in logging, it can be very intimidating seeing all these large metal tractors going around cutting down and hauling these huge trees that you can't even get your arms halfway around. So it's very scary stuff sometimes. Logging is represented in the NAICS website by code 113310. And from 2015 to 2020, there have been 83 injuries on the job site reported on the NAICS website. And there are about 8,000 businesses that are registered on that website. So 83 out of 8,000, that's not too bad. But out of those 83 injuries, about 19.3% of them were caused by falling objects / equipment. So any kind of objects falling or equipment such as, I guess, like the claw of a crane or something like that might fall and crush someone's foot or something. But yeah, that's what that means. So looking at the graph that I made for my report, you can see that the graph stayed around the same range. It only ever got as low as 9, and it got as high as 20. And for the most part, it was just in between there. If you were to take the average of all those points, it would likely be right through the middle, because its deviation is pretty evenly distributed. But although there is some deviation, the deviation itself is not very significant to the report, because there's really not a downward trend, there's not an upward trend suggesting that the workplace is getting more or less dangerous. It's kind of just wiggling. But moving on to my non-residential construction section of the report. Non-residential construction is a sector of construction, and there's over 60,000 businesses on record in the NAICS website, and the codes that I focus on for my report are codes 236210 and also 236220. There's two sectors to the non-residential construction. There is the industrial construction, and there is the commercial / institutional construction. Those are the two sectors that make up non-residential construction. So of those 60,000 businesses on record, there were about 1,545 injuries from 2015 to 2020. There were 1,545 injuries, and about 87% of those injuries required hospitalization, so they were quite severe, which is a high number, 87%. I mean, you are more than 3/4 likely to be put in the hospital if you get hurt on the site of a construction site. Pretty scary. Additionally, commercial / institutional construction had about 3 times the injuries that the industrial construction had. So to put it in perspective, that is putting it into perspective. The commercial construction does a lot. It's a lot more dangerous than the industrial construction. Looking at the graph for non-residential construction, figure 2 in my report, and that's on the last slide of this PowerPoint, you can see the orange line and the blue line. The orange line represents the commercial / institutional construction that I was talking about, and the blue line represents industrial. As you can see at that very first point, while the blue line isn't even at 5, the orange line is almost at 15. So in that first point, it's over 15 times as much. But the commercial construction is much more dangerous. The deviation on these two lines are insignificant, but the position of those lines are not. Like I was just talking about, the orange is higher up on the graph because it's much more frequent in commercial construction than industrial construction for there to be these injuries. The majority of these injuries occurred from falling. As you could imagine, tall buildings, construction, you have to hoist the worker up, and the majority of injuries result from those workers falling in some way, falling to a lower level. So they're up in the air and they fall down to the ground, or they might be digging down and he might be on this ground level and fall in. But either way, the majority of injuries come from workers falling to a lower level. So to conclude with that, perhaps construction workers need better safety as far as harnesses and maybe the cables that hold them up, and maybe the systems that hold them suspended, or maybe it's malpractice. Maybe they're not doing what they need to do. Maybe they think that, oh, it's not going to happen to me, so I don't need to wear my harness. In that case, they need better training to understand the severity of their situation. At the end of the day, you're always going to have some hard-headed people, just like with the logging. I know people, since I used to work in logging, I knew people who would get hurt, but they wouldn't say anything because, it saves money, and if you don't go to the doctor, even though that's silly not to go to the doctor. Most of the men I worked with were old, stubborn men that thought they were always right. So, but yeah, this concludes my PowerPoint on my analysis of two industries. Thank you.